This issue is personal to him. This issue is something that he has been working on for so many years. And Dr. Bob Ross, it's so wonderful to be here today and to introduce you and to see that your hard work and your dream is coming true. Dr. Ross.
You're getting way too much credit for this. Thank you, my friend Antonio Hernandez, with the great leadership that the California Community Foundation and their board, they got this going with the Bloom Initiative, focusing on the young men too often trapped in our juvenile justice system, and giving them a sense of self-worth and esteem and dignity so that they could move on and find an opportunity path. So that Bloom Initiative is going well. Thank you, Antonio, for your leadership and your partnership. Let me get through to some acknowledgments before we get to the substance. And much has been said in really eloquent ways, so my remarks can be briefer. First of all, this was an initiative, a strategy that I brought to our board of directors at the California Endowment. They approved this investment unanimously after we laid out not only what we were trying to do, but the partners we had at the table. And when I told our great friend, John Daisy, that the board approved this $50 million commitment unanimously, he had two things to say. He said, "Boy, Bob, a unanimous vote by a board. I'm not sure I've ever seen that before." And he also says, if you get a unanimous vote, you should have asked for more money. Maybe we can go back. But I want to just say there are a lot of folks in this room, and not in this room, with their fingerprints on this commitment and this strategy, even if you don't work at or for the California Endowment. On our staff, of course, the folks who do work at the California Endowment, Ray Colmenar, Charles Fields, Barbara Raymond, and a bunch of folks who have been cooking this strategy and helping us think about how to deploy these resources. So a round of applause for them. Secondly, of course, our board of directors. Outside the organization, some people here know because I spoke to you or I heard from you. I asked my board of directors for a mini sabbatical, kind of a mini 3-month immersion into the issue of the crisis of Black and brown men in this country. And I just wanted to hear from people about what a foundation like us could do or should do. And there are a bunch of folks here. I want to acknowledge we actually had also a kitchen cabinet to help us raise some of these issues and think through some of them. Members of that kitchen cabinet are here today, and when you hear some of these names, you will not be surprised that we had no choice but to move assertively and in a robust fashion to take this issue head on. And that is Connie Rice is here in the second row. By the way, Connie Rice just this week received the most prestigious honor in the nonprofit sector, national honor. It's sort of the Nobel Peace Prize of nonprofit work, and that is the John Gardner Award from the independent sector, and Connie Rice was that recipient this year. So when Connie's getting in your face from one side and Antonio's getting in your face from the other side, we had no choice. But also, and he'll be coming up this week, Mark Ridley Thomas was in that room. He and I have had a number of discussions about this. John Daisy, of course, Bishop Charles Blake. I'm not sure whether the bishop is here, but he was involved also. Brian Nelson and Kamala Harris from obviously from the Attorney General's office. Solomon Rivera for Karen Bass. Kathy Blumenfeld, I'm not sure if Kathy was here, another great partner when she was CEO at the Liberty Hill Foundation. And of course, Marquise Harris Dawson from the Community Coalition. I went around the country. I had probably 60 interviews. Jesse Williams was one of those interviews, the great actor. By the way, I saw Jesse Williams' great film, The Butler, one day, like a couple of weeks ago, that was on a Thursday. On a Friday, I went to a community event and saw Reverend James Lawson, who was the character that Jesse Williams played. Okay? And I asked Reverend Lawson what he liked most about the film. He said, I love the film, but what I liked most was that I got to tell my granddaughter that when I was that young, I looked that handsome. I want to thank Sharice Bremond and Veronica Melvin of Brotherhood Crusade and LA's Promise, respectively, marshaling, along with the Community Coalition, the army of people who went out into the neighborhoods this morning to try and get people back into school. And so a round of applause for Community Coalition, Brotherhood Crusade, LA's Promise. I see Gary Tobin from the Chamber of Commerce, and I see the Latino Chamber of Commerce is here. I want to thank them because business and corporate support and involvement for this population is going to be critical. And lastly, and I'm sure I'm missing people, but I want to acknowledge our friend and partner, Scott Budnick. Scott, where you at? I know Scott was here. I know he's most well known for the film The Hangover. That may be his mission, but his passion is these young men. And Scott Budnick has mentored countless of young black and brown men in our prisons, in our juvenile halls, and has been a fearless advocate for policy change around repairing the lives and reclaiming the lives of young men trapped in our incarceration system. So a round of applause for Scott Budnick as well. And of course, this great school, fabulous principal, Steve Zimmer. We heard from Steve earlier today in the school board. He spoke passionately to the outreach folks. Thank you so much, Steve. I think Steve may have had to leave, I'm not sure. And then John Daisy. John, you are a warrior for these young people, a warrior. And when you hear John speak, you know there is no political agenda other than what those young people need. And so thank you, John, for your leadership. Let me just say how we got here and what this is about, because it's not about the 50 million. It really is not, okay? What it's about is a combination of a strategic imperative and a moral imperative. And the strategic imperative is behind me. John was right. This is the future. California's future is in color. 70% of our young people are folks of color in this state. And as goes California, so goes the nation. And to get a little bit personal about that strategic imperative, if you walk into a newborn nursery in a hospital and you see 100 black male babies in that nursery, as of today, 33 of those 100 babies will go to prison. You can't have that. The rates of dropout, homicide rates that are up to 13, 14 times higher for black and brown young men than in white males, dropout rates that are 30, 40, 50% higher for young black and brown males, incarceration rates that are eight times higher. We can't have that. Strategically, our country cannot afford to lose this human capital. We just can't. We have to reclaim it. And that's what the conversation we had at the foundation was about. How can we leverage the work of assets and partners? Because 50 million is not going to get us there. Drop in the bucket. But partnerships will, and commitment will. And so the moral imperative was, if you contrast what you heard this morning from our speakers, from John Daisy, from Edward James Olmos, from Jesse Williams, or from these young people before you today, so think of the narrative we heard after the Trayvon Martin. What the Trayvon Martin event told us was, if you're black, you're brown, you're a male, you don't count. You're a threat, you're a menace, you are a problem. And what I'm most proud of today is to see so many folks coming together around a new narrative. And the new narrative is you are loved, you are needed, you are valued, you are cherished, and we need you to move this nation forward. And it's that change in narrative that's going to fix this. It's not the 50 million, trust me. It's just the dollars is just catalytic, okay? It's a symbolic investment, it's a real investment, but that's not the it. The it is we have to change the narrative. And so we didn't come to Manual Arts and to South LA because it was down the street from the California Endowment. Okay? We came here because there are assets, and there is passion, and there is energy, and there is a vision for a better future that's in these young people and the folks that surround them. And so the $50 million commitment from our board of directors is not charity, it's an investment. We are investors. Right? And so it's a smart investment because of the partnerships we've been able to work through. And so that's what it's about. We looked at the data, just to get a little wonky for a minute, and we learned that there are a lot of ways you can come at this. You can talk about, Mark Ridley Thomas and I had these conversations, you could talk about fatherhood, you could talk about parenting, you could talk about race, you could talk about employment. We were trying to get at, okay, what could we pick and focus on and address? And by way of example, demonstrate what a real strategic commitment looks like on this issue. So we're not trying to solve all the world's problems of young black and brown men and keeping them with a sense of hope. But we should just pick a couple of things. And the reason we're picking this partnership with schools and community is because we learned a few things. The data tell us that, A, 80%, up to 80% of black and brown boys in this country are not reading at third grade level. Many of them will go on to fail in school. B, chronic absence in schools is an early indicator of school failure. If you miss more than 15 days of school a year, you're heading for academic failure. C, suspensions. National leadership from this board, from this school district, John, and your board, thank you. National leadership on reversing the suspension rates, because if you are suspended in high school once, USC research tells us just one suspension reduces the likelihood of that child going to college by 40% for community college, 70% for four-year college. One suspension. And we're suspending kids hand over fist in this country. And then lastly, what we heard from Kamala Harris is the issue of truancy. If you're a truant, even in the early grades, 4 times greater likelihood of school failure. In other words, these young boys and these young men are telling us at very early stages, they could be wearing a sign on their chest, I'm losing hope. And how do we get smarter at an earlier stage? While the work that Scott Budnick and Andrew Jane Olmos and Antonio Hernandez and the California Community Foundation doing in the juvenile halls and the prisons is critical, that must work continue. Our job is to shut that thing down. In many neighborhoods and communities, the most efficient public system for them is the incarceration pipeline. We got to shut that down. And so if we focus on these early warning signals where these young people are reaching out for help, they're screaming for help, and we're just not recognizing it, that's what this partnership is about. And LA Unified has said, count us in, we're there. The community organizations, Community Coalition and LA's Promise and Brotherhood Crusade, count us in the partnership, we're there. And that's what this day is about. It's about a new narrative, about reclaiming lost capital. And so I just want to thank each and every one of you for inspiring us